From the outside, Kamikaze Chris was a dangerously skilled driver who made the streets his playground. There was no stopping his desire to win, but street racing is more than just speed. Even the best players can't always avoid fate in this high-stakes game. It looked like Chris had made his mark on the world, but then something terrible happened and turned his life upside down in an instant. What did really happen? After this, where does he go? Please read this sad story about Kamikaze Chris and the terrible event that changed everything. Chris isn't the type of person most people would think of as a street racing superstar. He drives that scary flat black El Camino on street criminals. It looked like he wasn't going to make it. On the other hand, he always breaks our hopes. Now, here's the deal. It was never part of a big plan. He just went with the flow of life. Because Chris has always been the underdog. Poor family living in a rough area of Oklahoma City, didn't have much as a child. He said that his family wasn't just having a hard time, they were completely broke. She wasn't just broke because she didn't have much money. The clothes she was giving away were really used. They were dirty, worn out, and past their best. It was up to him to figure out what else he wanted besides the basics. And Chris was only interested in one thing: racing, but not cars. Not at first. Chris first rode dirt bikes. He'll tell you why if you ask. He doesn't always like cars. He likes to race. He will race anything with wheels. A shopping cart, a dirt bike. And if you put one in front of him, he might even pick up a lawnmower. His first bike ride was when he was 3 years old, and he never looked back. In order to keep his bike going, he did all sorts of odd jobs while other kids his age played in the park. He lined up at the starting gate twice a week to race against people almost twice his age. That didn't bother him though. He was driven to win, loved speed, and worked hard, which made him stand out. That way of working, it came from his dad, who was a good drag boat racer who had one easy rule: you fix it after breaking it. That meant a lot to Chris. To get money for his next ride, he mowed fields, cut down trees, pumped gas, and did anything else. Every step up, from a BMX bike to his first dirt bike, he worked for. He was unstoppable once he tried real competition. At that point, he wasn't just running. Also, he helped other people go faster, especially with their cars. In high school, Kamikaze and Justin Big Chief Shearer met for the first time. It was like two puzzle pieces clicked into place. Both of them were very competitive. They were both crazy about cars, and never gave up when they were challenged. In fact, Kamikaze was the first person to call Big Chief by that famous name. But speed wasn't the only thing that brought them together. It was made in the garage late at night. Kamikaze wasn't just the guy who drove and talked very quickly. He was the one who worked on Big Chief's 1972 Pontiac Le Mans, also known as the Crow, in the garage every night. It wasn't just a car to them. It was what made them friends in the first place. They built the machine by hand, one late-night fix at a time. What Kamikaze learned in real life set him on his own path. He started by getting a Chevy LUV with a small block. Then there was a Blazer, which was also a small block, and finally an A-body Chevelle. On the other hand, that Chevelle was unique. There was a 71 with loud emerald green paint that looked like it belonged on a bass boat. There was nothing pretty about it, but it was mean and fast. The car is really loud and running nines, tearing up the streets. But cars come and go, and the game never stops. A small group of OKC racers who weren't just there to drive stayed close to Kamikaze. These racers were out to win. A lot of guys went just to hang out and show off their rides. Kamikaze, Big Chief, Dave Comstock, and the rest of their crew, on the other hand, raced because it was important to them. That was clear in the way Kamikaze drove. To win, he was willing to push the car down the road if it meant that. He wasn't careless. He planned everything. But he pushed harder than most, always balancing between order and chaos. That's how the name Kamikaze got its start. He was able to make even the most crazy things look easy. He drove because it came naturally to him. Some people needed a drink or something else to do to relax, but Kamikaze found peace at full speed, just inches from disaster. That's where he did well. It gave him a rush of pure energy to know that he was pushing himself and his car to their limits. That was what lived him. It didn't take long for people to notice his attitude. He brought that raw, no-holds-barred energy to the screen when he joined Big Chief on Street Outlaws in its third season. The show made the sport become more popular, and Kamikaze Chris was talked about by a lot of race fans across the country. He was now the proud owner of what might be the game's most famous El Camino. That being said, Chris's close friend Tyler Flip Pretty owned the El Camino before he got it. The Slut was what everyone called it, because it was a Frankenstein car made from bits that were left over from upgrading their friends' cars. It made a name for itself anyway. Everyone talked about Flip's car when he showed up in the first season of Street Outlaws. It was annoying, loud, and just plain silly. The rumors about how it was held together only made the story more interesting. Those zoomy headers shot nitrous fireballs right out of the bumpers. Sealant, JB Weld, duct tape, and enough Bondo to fill a swimming pool were said to have been used to fix it. When Flip pulled up to get his payment, the law hurt a little more. It was a mess, but the Slut moved quickly. For many years, Flip's friend Justin Big Chief Shearer knew that Chris should be the only one to get the car after Flip died. There should be no doubt or delay. There was a tarp over the car that had been there for over a year, collecting dust until the right people came along and brought it back to life. The engine didn't just start when Chris finally turned the key, it roared, like it had been there for him the whole time. It wasn't going to be easy for that car to come out of retirement though. One of the back brakes locked up and caught fire on the first real drive. That was just the beginning. Soon had broken it so badly that it had to be rebuilt from scratch. He then made a deal to put in a friend's 582 engine that was already built. It made him unhappy. Chris had always made his own engines. It felt wrong to use someone else's work. It turned out that his gut was right. That 582 turned into a bad dream. 13 rebuilds in one season. It felt like being in charge of a funny car team. Over and over, race, repair, blow it up and rebuild. Anyone would have broken. But that's just part of the game when you're after speed. Chris was sick of the pain. It was time to move on. He made the call. He put his savings together and joined forces with Graham Jones at Fast Times Motorworks to make something really cool. The 632 is made of aluminum and has 4 levels of nitrous. Besides that, he and his friend Les worked on a back half chassis conversion in the workshop. What is the goal? Easy. Get back into the top 10 in OKC. His name was back on the list by the summer of 2017, when he won races and made himself known. There was still something wrong, though. He couldn't settle because the car wasn't running the way he wanted it to. There were both new and used parts in the engine under the hood. They were all put together for one job, going fast. Arizona's Kincaid Racing Engines built the engine, with help from Wiseco for the rotating unit, and Crower and Pack for the valve train. When they switched to electronic fuel injection, they used parts from the creation of fuel injectors and let a Haltech EFI system run the show. The 6-stage nitrous system in the El Camino was also managed by the same Haltech setup, because 4 isn't enough. With all that power, getting movement was always hard. It was a waste of horsepower if the car wasn't set up right. The stock front-end design was slowing it down, so AutoFab Race Cars in Maryland made a new one out of chromoly tubes. Chris and Les put it together in the workshop. They also pulled out the radiator to save weight while they were at it. The engine was no longer cooled by air, but by ice water pumped from a tank in the back. With QA1 adjustable coilovers and pack springs at all 4 wheels, the suspension was fine-tuned to give the car the right amount of control and aggression. The original 4-link suspension was kept in place, and power went straight from a Powerglide transmission to a Moser 9-inch rear end. The car had been updated, but it still had that G-body feel to it. Still a little sketchy and crazy, which was great for Chris. Even with all the changes, there were still some things that couldn't be switched around. The El Camino's stock wheelbase was 117 inches long, and Chris pointed out that the driveshaft was 62.5 inches long, which isn't great for a race car. Because of where the cab was placed, it was officially a car, but felt like a truck. It wasn't possible to move everything back to make the weight distribution better. It had two 9.5x10, 5 Hoosier slick tires that did their best to grip the track. Still, each pass was a new adventure, which added to the fun. Chris was fine as long as he wasn't on fire. Chris doesn't just race on the weekends, it's how they live. Every screw, dent and late night spent in the garage has a story to tell. That car is more than just a machine. It was made with bloody hands, sleepless nights, and every extra dollar he could find, sometimes even the ones he couldn't. He runs a small heating and cooling business during the day. He cleans the Lexan windows, checks the spark plugs, dials in the tires, and double-checks the brakes at night, long after everyone else has gone to sleep. It's not possible for him to throw money at problems, so he makes sure nothing is left to chance. He is from the middle class, pays for his own car, and built it in his garage. Guys like him aren't supposed to race against the big names. Still, he does. Running races has cost him a lot of money more than once. He has been broke the whole time he's been on this show. But that label of underdog, that's not just a trick, that's just how things are. He'll tell you himself. He won't give up. Thrilled. So that's what you need to do to build, race and win an El Camino. He doesn't do it by himself, of course. There is a team behind every great driver. He stays in the fight with help from companies like Haltech, Speedmaster, and Wolf Aircraft Products. At its core though, this car shows what love, pride and unwavering determination can do when money isn't enough. If you think it's impossible to race like this, Chris will tell you it's not. Anyone who is ready to spend time, money, and heart could make a car like his, but there is one change. A lot of people think twice before jumping into something this serious. Chris never did. It's all or nothing for him. It always has been. He tried to fight that part of himself for years, but now he's on board with it. There's no middle ground. Whether he makes it big or fails, he'll be okay. And if you know anything about racing, you know that's the way you have to think to win. But he had no idea that the car that had made him so successful was about to send him straight into trouble. You see, racing on the street has never been the best or easiest thing to do, but for people who love speed, it's still one of the most exciting. There is a lot of excitement, raw power and tension at the starting line in Street Outlaws and its spin-offs. Fans know how to make split-second choices that can mean the difference between victory and disaster. Accidents happen all the time in sports. No matter how often it happens, it's always amazing how quickly a race car that has been fine-tuned can get into a terrible accident. Chris Kamikaze and his famous 1981 Chevy El Camino know this better than most. While making Street Outlaws in July 2020, Kamikaze, it was very painful for Chris to learn how mean street racing can be. It wasn't just a small scratch or dent on the hood. He was done with his El Camino. It was almost impossible to save the frame, chassis, engine, turbochargers and other parts. A few bits, like the shifter, the rear housing, and the parachute lever, could still be used. Chris told the story on his YouTube account, Kamikaze Life, after the fact. Already that day, the Elco was being a pain. He was having trouble with the driveshaft monitor. It didn't make him feel good to race, but when another car challenged him, he couldn't say no. After one race, his favorite El Camino was just a twisted piece of metal. He loved that Elco more than any other car he owned, and he had a lot of memories with it. Losing it wasn't just about money, or the many hours he'd spent making it. Seeing it fall apart was a huge emotional hit, the end of an era. But Kamikaze Chris doesn't give up. He could still race after this accident. It was just one more test. He was ready to face it head on, like a real driver. For his big return, he did something crazy. He put a bunch of broken El Camino parts on eBay. Not just any parts. The Weld race wheel, Mickey Thompson tire, and TBM brake rotor were ripped off the passenger side when the car flew off the road, in front of cameras, from Discovery Channel. He signed them too, which made it even better. The auction became very famous very quickly. With 8 days left, the number of bids jumped over 100 and reached an amazing $10,600. But Chris then made things more dangerous. He promised that he would cook and serve the winner a steak dinner himself if the sale reached $25,000. Live on Facebook while his race suit was on. Fans were thrilled by the risky move, and they eagerly accepted the dare. It's not often that broken down car parts are worth much, but these weren't just any pieces. They were pieces of history in the sport. That meant something to people who liked Street Outlaws. Chris got more than 100 orders in just 1 week, and he used the money to build his next car, a fast C5 Corvette. This new car had a familiar look to it, the mean way it stood, and the high shine on its black paint. In many ways it was like the El Camino had come back to life. Chris pulled the transmission, engine and drivetrain from the rubble and carefully put each part back together again before putting them in the Corvette. The Elco may have been destroyed by fire, but Chris made sure that its spirit lived on. Kamikaze, Chris also ran with his TV fame and started Kamikaze Motorsports, an online store full of merchandise and plastic models of his famous El Camino. In case that wasn't enough, he also has a YouTube account called Kamikaze Life where he shows fans his daily life and goes on crazy road trips with them. Since it began in 2020, it has gained over 70,000 members very quickly. But racing is still the most important thing to him, even with all of these other things he does. Fans were shocked when he seemed to disappear from the bad guys on the street. There was no big speech or goodbye, they were just gone. Of course, rumors began to spread. Was he fired? Did he quit? Was he done with bikes? Chris finally told his friends on Facebook in July 2023 that he wouldn't be in the 6th season of No Prep Kings, but he didn't say why he wasn't there, so fans are left with more questions than answers. Instead of ending the rumors, his quiet made them stronger, causing even more ideas about why he left. But even with all the guessing, one thing is still for sure. Kamikaze Chris has never taken a break from race cars. He still rules the streets of Oklahoma, and competes in no-prep games all over the country. His attention these days is on his C5 Corvette, a car that shows he has no plans to slow down. Kamikaze was there for every turn. Chris is still a very strong person, constantly moving forward with unwavering determination. Fans have seen him at his best and worst, but one thing has always stayed the same. He never backs down from a task. Whether he's on or off screen, his journey is far from over. He has a long way to go.